Hello again. I'm Peter Holmes, and this is Dfpkt Pod 3, so the third part. Now, so far, just to recap, we've looked at definition, abstract things, and I started applying the ideas in those parts to talk about facts and propositions. And then at the end of the previous part, Pod 2, I went on to talking about the theory of knowledge as justified true belief, what's called the JTB theory. And I was trying to show that by insisting on the truth condition in that theory, this mistakes what we say for the way things are and what we can know about them. So it's an example of the kind of confusion I started off talking about. Now, in this section, Pod 3, I'm going to, as it were, add to this talk about this discussion of the JTB by looking at what's called the Gettier problem. And this is something that emerged, named after a philosopher called Edmund Gettier, over 50 years ago, maybe 60 years ago now, I've forgotten the date. Anyway, Gettier raised an objection or a critique of the JTB theory of knowledge. Actually, his criticism, funnily enough, was a matter of logic. It was a logical point about the mistake of the JTB, but it very quickly turned into an epistemological discussion rather than a logical one. So I'm going to go into it, partly because it also provides an insight into what I'm saying about mixing up what we say for the way things are. So here we go, Chapter 7, the Gettier problem. Recycling the confusion in the expression true belief, which I talked about before, Edmund Gettier pointed out that sometimes justified true belief does not amount to knowledge, so that the JTB definition is incorrect, or at least inadequate, and discussion of the so-called Gettier problem and possible solutions continues. But the assumed necessity of the truth condition, which I was talking about in the previous pod, often remains an unrecognised difficulty. So my point is that the JTB is wrong, not for the reason necessarily that Gettier talks about. I don't think his critique actually tackles the real problem, as I'm going to go on to show. For anyone unfamiliar with Gettier cases, here is an example I have used elsewhere. So it's like a little story, a Gettier case, which is supposed to illustrate the point that he was making. Anyway, here it is, a Gettier case. A woman sees a group of people and mistakes one of them, a stranger, for her friend. So she believes her friend is there. And as it happens, her friend really is there, but hidden. So what she believes is indeed the case. But does she know her friend is there? In other words, this is a case of knowledge. And here's my, as it were, critique of this. The problem for the woman in this story is not that she believes something that, unbeknown to her, happens to be true, a factual assertion. She simply believes a feature of reality is the case for reasons that do not objectively justify the belief. The problem is her lack of knowledge of the actual feature of reality. Objective knowledge that we Gettier spectators do have. In the post-match debriefing, a Gettier protagonist would say they made a mistake. They would never say they knew the actual feature of reality to be the case. That is not how we use the word know and its cognates. For example, we did not stop knowing that the earth is flat. To put it another way, the main condition for our knowing something is the case is that it is indeed the case. Our justification for believing it is the case is a separate, though disputed matter, and we can be mistaken. But none of this has anything to do with language, and therefore anything to do with truth or falsehood. So the truth condition is irrelevant. We may confuse ourselves by saying it is true that a feature of reality is the case, but a feature of reality is neither true nor false. The truth is not out there any more than falsehood is. Outside language, reality is not linguistic. So now I'm going to go on to chapter 8, which I've called Truth as Correspondence. So up until now, I've been using the words true and false and talking about them with regard to the ideas I'm putting forward. So we're getting really to the heart of something here. And if you remember, the title of this whole thing is Definition, Facts, Propositions, Knowledge and Truth. So coming to the heart of it. And this is quite a sticky section, this one, I think, so I hope you can stick it. I'll do the best I can to explain things as clearly as I can. So chapter 8, Truth as Correspondence. Like the word knowledge, the word truth is not the name of an abstract thing that can be described. Signs, such as words, can mean only what we use them to mean, and there is no other court of appeal. For example, what we mean when we talk about factual assertions being true is what constitutes what we call truth, and that's it. So what is called a theory of truth can only be an explanation of how we use or could use the word truth. Its cognates, such as true, and related words such as false and falsehood. Just to stop there for a minute, I use the expression there, theory of truth, and I just want to point out something here which I think is quite relevant when it comes to, as it were, demystifying philosophy. The word theory has great prestige for us, particularly because of the great success and continuing and developing success of natural science theories. So the theory of gravity, the theory of thermodynamics, the theory of evolution, these have all, in the way they developed, have turned out to be amazingly powerful things. So, as I say, theory has prestige because of this. But a theory is an explanation, so it can help to remember that when we talk about the theory of something. Now, in philosophy, you get the theory of knowledge, epistemology, the theory of truth, which is what we're going on to here. What is truth? And we then put together these rather ground-sounding things, theories of truth, and there are lots of them. But it helps, I think, to remember this is just an explanation of the ways we do or could use the words truth and its cognates. Now, so this section I've called the correspondence, truth as correspondence. So we're talking here about the correspondence theory of truth. Anyway, what is called a theory can only be an explanation of how we use these words. But metaphysicians will Ferkel. And among the various theories of truth, the most prominent are called correspondence theories. I won't go into the different kinds here, because a claim common to such theories is that an assertion is true if there is or was a feature of reality that corresponds with the assertion, and false if there is not or was not. And one formulation of the claim is truth is that which corresponds with or comports with reality. So that's a correspondence theory. For example, this is a famous one as well, the assertion snow is white is true, supposedly, because real snow really is white, at least usually. And this is an attractively simple explanation of what makes an assertion true, which is why correspondence theories are so popular. They seem commonsensical. But in this context, the trusty, concise Oxford Dictionary, as before, page 300, defines the noun correspondence in the relevant sense as agreement, similarity, or harmony. And other dictionaries define correspondence as a close connection or equivalence. So I'll go through those words again, what a correspondence is supposed to be. Agreement, similarity, harmony, close connection or equivalence. Trouble is, The words snow and white are not in any way similar or equivalent to, connected with, or in agreement or harmony with the things we call snow and white. A name no more corresponds with the thing it names than an arrow corresponds with its target. And to pursue the analogy, it is not the arrow that identifies, defines, or delimits its target. There is no natural or necessary connection between a name and what we name with it. The word correspondence implies a two-way relationship, but there is no relationship at all, unless an arrow can be said to have a relationship with its target. The arrow, as it were, does not point in both directions, which is what I think correspondence implies. And in structuralist terms, that the signified is free-floating is unavoidable. It is a feature of language, of the use of signs. Now, just to break off there, I'm not sure if you've come across these terms, but I'm referring here to Saussure's structuralist theory, which came to prominence in the middle of the last century, arguably, and gave birth to all sorts of what came to be called post-structuralist theories, among which was Derrida's deconstruction. And the basic idea that Saussure, the basic mistake I think that Saussure made, was that he argued that the sign contains two things, or rather consists of two things, a signifier and a signified. In other words, the thing which the signifier signifies. Okay, he said that this is what the sign consists of, and I will say a little bit more about it later, why it's a huge mistake. But anyway, the point is that the signified is a free-floating thing, which is going back to the idea of the words snow and white. I'll carry on. Arguably, words such as splash and smack are exceptions, but such onomatopoeias are conventional, idiomatic and language specific. If they are exceptions, they only prove, meaning test the rule, which holds for all other names. In other words, there's no connection, natural or inherent or necessary connection between a name and the thing we use it to name. We can use the word dog to talk about dogs, but there is nothing canine about the word dog or the word canine. To put this another way, the things we name using the words snow and white could be any things whatsoever. Features of reality exist, but they do not organise themselves in order to correspond with the ways we talk about them. To think that is to mistake what we say about things for the way things are. Since there is no correspondence between names and what they name, there can be no correspondence between factual assertions and what they assert. There is no agreement, similarity, harmony, close connection or equivalence between the assertion snow is white and the feature of reality that it asserts. And once pointed out, the circularity of the correspondence claim is obvious. Here it is again expressed more formally. The assertion snow is white is true if and only if snow is white. In effect, this is a tautology, a purely linguistic exercise. And I want to add here that defining truth in a target language by using a meta-language is just another linguistic exercise. I'm making a sort of side reference there to Tarski, the philosopher Tarski, which you might like to look up and find out about, his idea rather. The idea that the whiteness of snow is a truth maker and the assertion snow is white is a truth bearer restates and reinforces the idea of correspondence. And I'm referring there to what's become to be called truth maker and truth bearer, or truth maker stroke truth bearer theory, a way of explaining how truth works or what truth consists in. But anyway, it restates and reinforces the idea of a correspondence. But what we call truth can only be a function of the ways we use language in factual assertions. To repeat, truth is not out there any more than falsehood is. What we call reality is not the set of all possible truth makers. nor is it the set of all possible falsehood makers, because those are both things to do with language. Correspondence theories of truth are mired in the myth of propositions that I referred to in the previous pod, which is pervasive. For example, the JTB truth condition, let me remind you, S knows that P if and only if P is true, is an expression of the supposed correspondence between a feature of reality and a proposition. Indeed, the correspondence assumed in the JTB definition is so perfect that it amounts to identity. A feature of reality and a proposition asserting it are one and the same thing. But a feature of reality can be identified and described in a limitless number of ways for different purposes. Within each kind of description, there can classically be true or false claims. No true description is truer than other true descriptions, and no one kind of description has an inherent priority over the others. And these facts have considerable implications. Now, that last bit there is a bit of a tease because I'm setting up what's going to come next, because I'm going to go on to talk about relativism and the fear that we have that truth is always relative, so there's no such thing as really as truth, and so on. There's some of the confusions that have entered philosophy, particularly in the last maybe 100, 150 years, I think, for various reasons, to do with the turn to language. But I'm going to stop there. Thanks very much for watching and or listening, and I hope to see you again for the fourth part of Dfpkt.